Alright, peace to you, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Now, in today's video, I just want to announce to you guys that I am writing a new book. I already kind of hinted at it in that debate I posted with the Southern Israelite. And that is a book where I seek to completely and utterly refute the Hadithan position as best as possible. I am going through and trying to find every last argument these people make in order to justify their Hadith. All these arguments they make using the Quran, all these different points and issues and controversies that they bring up, and they try to justify their Hadith and religion. They try to introduce their Hadith into a conversation. This book, God willing, is going to deal with all of that. And I seek to make this book like a very, very useful, reliable resource in our debates, in our dealing with these people, in our witnessing unto people, in our proselytizing or whatever. When we're dealing with this subject, I want it to be an incredibly useful tool. And the book name is, what was the name of the book? I can't believe I'm forgetting it right now. It's only a new idea, so it's not yet entrenched in my mind. Yeah, the book name is A Complete Refutation of the Hadith, All Objections Considered. A Complete Refutation of the Hadith, All Objections Considered. Now, I know this one is definitely not going to be that long, maybe God knows best, but 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 months in the writing process, and then I can have it out to you guys completed. It's not going to be anywhere near the size of the Flat Earth Manifesto. This is a much easier topic to deal with. I knew that when I ventured to write the Flat Earth Manifesto that I want to write a book on at least 2 subjects, and that is Flat Earth. And I knocked that one out first because that was the most difficult subject to deal with. And then afterwards a book dealing with all the objections the Hadithan makes. And now I'm going on to the second project right now. And oh yeah, speaking of the Flat Earth Manifesto, I don't think I'm going to be making a paper copy of that book because all the images and stuff that I use, there's no way I can get the permission for everything. It's impossible for me. It's just going to have to maybe be a video presentation I do in the future, God willing, or something along those lines. But yeah, there's no way I'm going to get a paper copy of that. So what I'd recommend to you guys, do what I'm going to do, is just go to your nearest Staples or wherever the other place, or if you have like a nice industrial powered printer, just print off the book for yourself and bind it and cover it and everything like that. That's what I would recommend you guys, but there's no way I can produce a paper copy of that. I can't jump through all the hoops and everything like that in order to get permission to use all those images. I don't even know where I got many of those images, so that's going to be impossible for me. So but that's not going to be the case for this book, Complete Refutation of the Hadith, All Objections Considered, because you got to keep in mind, when I wrote the Flat Earth Manifesto, all I knew was I wanted to write a book on the Flat Earth. That's it. I didn't know anything about the book writing process or anything like that. I just dove right into it. But now I have a little more knowledge, a little more understanding. Now, God willing, if I do use images in this book, which I'm going to use them sparingly, but if I do, I'm going to make sure I get them from sources which I can accredit and I have the permission to use them, etc., etc. Now I have a little bit more knowledge and experience after writing one book already. So anyways, like I said, this book will be dealing with every single point that the Hadithan has made, and I hope it's going to be a useful resource for you. And I will also leave the introduction to this book as well at the end of this video because I've done a reading on it. But I just want to announce that to you guys, and I hope this announcement was a blessing. And yeah, peace to you. Remember, deceit abounds, so keep your eyes wide open. Peace out. Islam, if by Islam we mean submission to the one true God of all mankind, is, without question, the way. To worship one Creator without any associate partners, to honor His holy law, and to live in anticipation of a soon coming great and terrible day where we, along with every other man and woman, will be raised before that same single Creator to give an account for how we lived our lives, is the manifest truth. There is no doctrine or system in this world which can possibly compare to the shining brilliance that is Islam. Under Islam's provisions, we serve one master, which means our attention remained undivided. We follow his code of conduct, which keeps us staying blessed by its wise commandments. And we are taught to fear the approach of an hour where all mortals will be judged by the Lord for all the things we have done, which means we stay on the straight and righteous path, because we know nothing escapes the ever-watchful eye of God, who brings forth all things, whether open or concealed, in the afterlife. Islam gives us supreme focus, perfect guidance, and ultimate accountability. It is the original way for man, which has been revealed and instituted by the one who created him. Islam, and again, by Islam I mean submission to God, is in fact the natural consequence of God being who He is and there being a world created by Him. Because He is the Most High who sustains all things according to His grand will, as a natural effect of this unfathomable power, everything in the heavens and the earth simply yields to Him, whether willingly or unwillingly. All created matter must submit to the will of God, because it is irresistibly compelled into such a state by His uncontestable control. We, the Muslims, and by Muslims I mean those who willingly submit to God, have the same way as the whole of the created universe. The sky above, the ground below, and all of the inhabitants and life that lie between these two things share the same creed as us. The natural world joins us blessed Muslims in saying, "There is no God but God," and "We fully submit to you, O Lord." With such a grand cosmic creed as that, it is certainly conspicuous to see that the people in this world who claim to uphold this evergreen faith of submission to God alone, the so-called Muslim countries, are in the pitiable state they are in today. If this be the doctrine they hold to, submission to God and upholding His good commandments, then why are their respective nations riddled with endless problems such as ignorant superstitions, oppressive tyrannies, religious corruption, and infighting amongst sects? If these people stand for the Most High God with no associate partners, which is what they claim, then how come nobody wants to live in their countries? Hordes and hordes of their own are leaving their so-called Islamic homelands by the boatload to countries like Canada, America, England, and others, seeking refuge in the Western world from their dysfunctional civilizations they were born and raised in. Why, too, is so-called Islam increasingly losing favor amongst the children and grandchildren of those immigrants, largely being cast aside for Western secularism? Despite the ubiquitous presence of more than a fair share of handsomely funded mosques in the East and an increasing number of well-funded mosques in the West, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that so-called Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents force them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. Why as well does so-called Islam have no real respect within serious intellectual circles? By no means am I suggesting that because Western academics don't like a particular ideology, that in and of itself proves said ideology to be incorrect. On the contrary, there are many polemics I too could make against Western academics, and many which I have done. Read my Flat Earth Manifesto for more on that. But what I am trying to say here is, why does so-called Islam get treated like just another superstitious religious cult from the ancient world? Just like Christianity for the Romans, Judaism for the Jews, and Hinduism for the Indians, so-called Islam is just another bundle of mindless rites and rituals, just with more of an Arabian flavor. Although you and I know it is a truth from God for all mankind, nothing appears to make it specially distinct or superior to the myriad of other false religions humanity has to offer, in the minds of many scholars. Why, we the believers must ask, has the holy faith been defeated? Despite these so-called Islamic institutions having plenty of dollars to grease their wheels for centuries now, how come we see the humiliating failure and shame of so-called Islam placed before our wide-open eyes every single day in the modern world? This worldview, which was once thought unbreakable like the Titanic, has found itself crushed by the iceberg of modernity and is fast sinking into the cold, dark ocean. All that is left for us now is either finding coping mechanisms to avoid facing reality if we want to stay, or apostatizing if we decide to leave for something better, which many have already done. One must inquire, therefore, pourquoi? Well, my dear reader, these endemic snags which so-called Islam faces in the modern world are not truly the problems of Islam, but in fact the glaring failures of, to use the accurate label which the writer Aidad Safar gave it, an Arab religion. In no way was I inveighing against true Islam or the Holy Quran in my preceding paragraphs, but instead my criticisms were leveled against an impostor Arab religion which has so deceitfully called itself Islam and led astray many thereby. It is not Islam which Lebanese, Iraqis, Afghans, Pakistanis, and many others are fleeing from by the thousands, but it is in fact the apostate Arab religion from which they are refugees. It is not Islam which has been so virulently funded in the mosques and yet used that money towards nothing, but it is in fact the apostate Arab religion which has been derelict with its funds, lining the pockets of corrupt religious and governmental predators instead of using that wealth to effect real change. It is not Islam which has been eating the bitter crow of secular Western academics, but it is the apostate Arab religion which has been mauled and hideously disfigured by the criticisms of these atheist men in the universities. This pagan, foreign Arab religion, and all of its variants including Sunniism, Shiaism, Wahhabism, etc., is not to be found anywhere within the glorious Quran, and is actually specifically condemned within its pages. Although the Arab religion, or religions, claim to uphold the Quran as the central authoritative text of its faith, this statement might as well be George Bush's statements about weapons of mass destruction. Both carry a similar level of truthfulness. The deviant, froward Arab religion, which is popularly called Islam, is not centered around the timeless doctrine of submission to God alone, but instead is predicated entirely upon surrendering one's own reasoning faculties to man-made rules, deliberations, and opinions of other people who are deemed greater and holier than oneself. Much like other human-contrived religions like Catholicism, Buddhism, Sikhism, etc., it too carries a spirit of intellectual idolatry by its ascribing of absolute infallibility to the words of men over and above the words of God, an inherently anti-Quranic, anti-monotheistic position to uphold. But if the Arab religion does not find its genesis within the Quran, then from whence has its invasive weed sprung up? And thus the topic of this discourse presents itself before us. Among many other things, the Arab religion is primarily the firstborn son of a damnable body of literature outside of the Quran, which has enthralled the minds of the so-called Muslim world. This library of other stuff is affectionately known by them, but disparagingly by myself, as the Hadith. If I had to trace all of the aforementioned problems to one root cause, the evil seed from which they sprouted, it would be this Hadith. The Quran, without us even needing to say anything about it, shines like a lamp in a dark room. Its doctrine is so pure, so holy, so markedly reasonable, and so miraculously revolutionary considering the time period in which it was revealed. The Hadith, on the other hand, stinks like centuries-old corpses of dead pagan Arabs being exhumed from the earth. Its doctrines are a stale miasma which tragically pollutes the name of Islam to which it has attached itself with its foul, repugnant odor. These two sources, the Holy Quran and the unholy Hadith, could not be more different. The former is transcendent in its scope, filled with timeless wisdom that speaks to the soul, applicable in all places, in all time periods, for all peoples upon this earth, a true revelation from the Creator to mankind. The latter, however, is clearly a flawed product markedly of its era, filled with the ignorance and superstitions of the limited people who wrote it long ago. Reading the Hadith literature is like taking your head and dunking it into 7th century Arabia. From not the Quran, but the Hadith do we get all of the discrediting blots which have become characteristic of the Arab religion which calls itself Islam. From circumbobulating and bowing down to stone idols, to casting rocks against pillars, imagining it as the devil, to drinking so-called holy water, Zamzam, believing it makes God more willing to answer your prayers, to mindlessly reciting things in a language we do not understand, to the slaughtering of infidels, to the constant breaking up of people into sects and subsequent bloodshed between these sects, to the endless religious legislation from boards of long-bearded scholars that end up suffocating the common people, and much more. Almost everything that has made the word Islam hated, feared, and mocked in the modern world can be accredited to the Hadith. This horrible monster called the Hadith is the true source of the internally imploding Arab religion. Even though it has been the thing responsible for dragging down the so-called Muslim nations for a long time, nevertheless, the adherents of the Arab religion, as if suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, will defend the cause of their demise, insisting on the necessity of the Hadith, claiming that without it our faith would be incomplete and that the Quran would be incomprehensible. It is this thoroughly erroneous claim which I seek to challenge here. In the following pages, I, if God should allow me, will show you that the Quran not only can be satisfactorily understood without this burdensome hadith, but in fact that trying to understand the Quran through the hadith is contradictory to the core tenets of the Quranic message. I will demonstrate the Quran and hadith are like pure water and dirty crude oil respectively, two substances which cannot be reconciled with one another, no matter how vigorously religionists will attempt to mix them. I seek to accomplish this by dissecting all of the common arguments forwarded by the adherents of the Arab religion, which I shall call from here onward the Hadithans, that make the case for their extraneous body of literature outside of the Quran, and show the fallaciousness of their claims. The Arab religion and its beloved Hadith has been the monkey on the back of the East for over 1,000 years, and it is time we wring that hairy scoundrel off of us, the irreverent prelest of the so-called Islamic world, by its committing of exemplary fraud, corruption, extortion, and distortion of the truth in the name of God, can be traced back to the Hadith as its source, which has left them philosophically and morally degenerate. Here in this presentation, you will see that the Hadith is not just superfluous, but inimical to the words of the Most High, through the dismantling of all of the popularist propositions made for its canonicity and authenticity. These mullahs, muftis, imams, sheikhs, and other religious power brokers in the Orient, which have been calling the shot and using their regressive, hadith-based mind control to fleece their flocks to the tune of millions, know that their time is up. Their counterfeit religion has been so ruthlessly exposed in the last few decades by good, God-fearing men, many of whom have been killed by them, that now they have been compelled to develop some arguments in order to justify what they have been teaching. No matter how flimsy those arguments are, in the wake of this avalanche of evidence which has been pressed against their necks, these now disreputable men are forced to cough up something. It is these very collections of responses which they have hawked from the back of their throats in a desperate attempt to save their careers I seek to dismantle here. Every point they have ever made against the Quran alone believers as a justification to assert their unwarranted hadith into conversations about Islam will both be considered and dealt with in the present undertaking. From there, I introduce you, my honored reader, to a complete refutation of the hadith, all objections considered.